You had said that you had stayed in the informal settlements. So what I know is that this happened perhaps immediately after you came back from the US, and you, I think I have some prior knowledge that you did stay in the informal settlements, places like Mathare and all those kind of things. So the issue was you were staying there for a whole month without moving to other areas. So perhaps you could shed more light on this experience and how it was to you, and how perhaps this had impact before you set up the trust that you have. Thanks.
It's interesting that you asked about the informal settlements in Nairobi, where the majority of Nairobians live. We are probably the minority sitting here at Intercontinental. The majority live in the informal settlements, and they're very politically aware and are really enjoying the fact that we are uncomfortable with Baba Yao. They're really, is really enjoying it. The fact that middle class are twittering and saying, oh, this is really, you know, this man throws stones, and they're saying, Mutaona sasa. This is Mutaona sasa. We will have Mike Sonko at the airport to greet President Obama when he visits. Mutaona. So they're really, you know, it's really, it's really, you know, because, you know, in the nominations, we weren't there, you know. We were on Twitter, and now we make the move to, we need to jump into the dirty pool, as it were, and clean it up, because we have the skills to do it. There is nothing as humbling as living with ordinary Kenyans on their terms. When I traveled around, I would carry a sleeping bag, and people would sit, would come, I would arrive somewhere unannounced, and people would start coming out of curiosity. And eventually there'd be a big crowd, and we talk late into the night. It is always good to talk into the night, because women in Kenya are the ones who do most of the work. And so women aren't available at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to talk politics and about, you know. Women, it's from 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, that's when they'll show up. Because, you know, children have been fed, put to bed, and you're able to discuss national issues with them. And women are much more articulate than men about especially livelihood issues, health, education, very, very clear and articulate about those issues. I was telling Ali Khan the other day about if you go into Mukuru, which I consider to be, you know, Kibera is famous as the biggest slum in Africa. It's been hyped quite a bit. I think the Mukurus are now the biggest, but it's long. All those different Kwa Ruben, Kwa Jenga, Kwa, you know, commercial, and much harder. All of you who have interest in companies that operate in industrial area, many of your workers will come from Mukuru. And what's happening there, which is unfortunate, is the land is being squeezed. You know, private developers are taking over the land. We feel the crime rate rising in more affluent parts of the city partly as a result of that. But these areas have their own sense of community that one respects, and, you know, I felt privileged to be part of and humbled to witness. I found in one part of Mukuru, I'm sure there might be people here who live in Karen, the electricity lines that go to Karen pass right over Mukuru. And they're huge, they're major power lines. And below that you have the smaller power lines that take electricity into homes. Now, the system in Mukuru is, there's an informal system of electricity distribution, which means that you throw a wire and it wraps itself around the smaller power line. And then that wire you distribute, and you charge people 20 shillings a month or whatever. And, you know, I've seen that in Bangalore, I've seen that in Rio, I've seen it's, you know, all informal settlements have the same system. And these local electricity distribution services are typically provided by quote unquote gangs, but groups of usually young men. And in Mukuru, what I found touching was the group of young men, or the groups of young men that do it there, have to contend with the fact that they have an attrition rate of 1 death per month in providing this service. Yes, they make the money because they'll provide electricity to rows of slum homes and charge a rate every month for electricity. But when you're trying to throw that wire up so that it can wrap itself around the power line, the big power line that goes to Karen is called Super Cobra, and it makes a noise. I'm not an engineer, but it has a humming sound day and night. And because the population density is increasing, we now have double-story slums in Mukuru. People who are living down and others who are living up in just corrugated iron slums. And if you're living in one of those corrugated iron on the second level, plates and spoons move depending on what time of the day it is, because of just the magnetism of these of the Super Cobra. But if you're throwing your line to be able to tap the electricity from the lower power line, the Super Cobra's magnetism can pull it up, and so you find yourself holding onto a wire that sends back a huge jolt, kills you dead, 1 dead per month. So if Ali Khan and John decide to go and start that business there, we'll be kicked out, because these are people who do pay a very high cost for this very useful service that they provide, and they will defend it fairly aggressively in ways that I don't think we'll be able to respond.
You've talked about cooperation with the ICC. Can you enlighten us on what non-cooperation looks like? And the second question that I have is, if we go into the first round, what are the aspects, or what are the chances that we will have a number of voters disengaged in the second round should their candidate not win?
In the simplest terms, non-cooperation is the key defendants now, they're all defendants, not showing up for any reason, not showing up. If they don't go, if the ICC says that these are the dates for trial or whatever, and they don't show up for any reason. That's, I think, the simplest way I can put it. I'm sure the lawyers have there are other forms of non-cooperation that I've heard with regard to Kenya providing the ICC with information, documentation, etc. But in the simplest form, in terms of where we have reached with the process, it's just showing up and participating in the process, letting it run its course, and the result being internalized properly. Will people opt out in the second round? That is a danger. Therefore, swing vote. We can't afford to opt out. We have to remain engaged. Otherwise, people opt out, and that makes it a lot easier to say, I have no ownership of this process. I therefore reject it. I am therefore ready to agitate against it. We must all own this process. So swing vote is not up to March 4th alone. Swing vote is up to the runoff. It's until we are finished with this process.
I'm a visitor here. Obviously I have African roots, but I'm born in Paris and I actually live in The Hague, so close to the ICC building. So my question is with respect to the African diaspora, which is actually baffled by this whole ICC issue in Kenya, and putting up onto the question, the cooperation matter of Kenya with ICC, and what does the ICC issue mean for the people, the root people, the poor people on the ground, who actually understand, have a big say in electing our next leader? Why does it matter to them? For us as an African diaspora, we just don't understand the whole issue. It's very strange.
Okay. Welcome to Kenya. You asked a question about, what does ICC mean for the poor, for the ordinary Kenyan. In the simplest terms, ICC means accountability, but in a very simple way. It has become more complicated as it has rolled out, which is the way these things are. I happened to be in Eldoret when the first 6 names of key suspects in the ICC cases were announced. And I was sitting in a room of people from different ethnic groups who were watching this on television, live. And the thing that struck me, which I think was an important step forward for Kenya, was, number one, people were completely impressed and surprised to see senior leaders who have never been held to account sitting in a dock, being asked, what is your name? Can you confirm this is your name? What is your occupation? And this was a shock for us as Kenyans. And for poor Kenyans, this was, I think, something that was quite liberating. It is the kind of thing that is very quickly taken for granted, but I think that was an important step, just in that there are institutions out there, we should quickly make them Kenyan in a way that is politically manageable by ourselves, that no one in the elite can buy, kill, or intimidate. Up to that moment, there was no institution in Kenya that some of the top leaders could not buy, kill, or intimidate. And so for people, that was impressive. Now then, the flip side of the coin was that people said, the list is incomplete. You see? There are certain people from certain ethnic groups who are not there. So then it gained another narrative. So it had both a positive and a negative. And life and politics is about mitigating the negative and consolidating the positive.
Now, like many people here, I keep on saying I can't wait for March 5th, 6th, 7th, or if there's a runoff, April 15th, because now we'll be back to business and I can focus on other things apart from elections. And I think that is a problem. And I know you had a fantastic program, which was Uongozi, which ended, I think, a few days ago. I can see you have this initiative called Swing Vote 2013, which should end again after the election. And a few years down the line, maybe a year before the next election, there's going to be a surge of activities again to educate Kenyans on how to vote and all that. And what has been said in the past is that behavior change does not occur based on one activity or one communication campaign. So my question to you is, what next after March or April? Are we going to wait for the next 4 years in silence and then begin to raise the same issues of corruption, governance, how we elect leaders, tribalism? So what is next for you? Or what would you recommend as the most ideal model for changing the behavior, perceptions, and the way Kenyans vote in the long run? Because I'd imagine that in the next 20 years, I want to say that I've walked the journey, have seen Kenyans, how they behave, and 20 years later, I believe that their behaviors have changed. I'm not talking about the issues that we've been talking about for the last 10 years.
Everyone's waiting for March 5th, as if everything will go back to normal, or is it if we have a runoff, whenever in April? Number one, things won't go back to normal. Things will never be the same again. It's going to change completely. The normality that we are now experiencing, enjoying, and being part of is over March 5th. It will be the same after the runoff. And it's for us to engage as Inuka, key issues that we've already identified. Devolution, absolutely critical. We get that wrong, we will not have an explosion, we'll have an implosion in Kenya. Security, inequality, and essentially consolidating the spirit of constitutionalism in a manner that the majority of Kenyans are able to understand, enjoy, and engage in a peaceful and straightforward manner. So swing vote is about this election and the possible runoff. It cannot end after that. You can't say, phew, we are finished. Job well done, and life goes back to normal. I think that's what I would like to emphasize. Life will never be normal again.
I would really like to thank John, because I think we got an insight into into what's going on, a perspective that I think is very rare sometimes in the heated atmosphere of what we read in the newspaper every day. John, I wish you from the bottom of my heart the greatest success. I will hope one day you will take the leadership position in this country that I think you deserve. And I feel incredibly confident you would lead us very, very far. And I hope that will happen one day, that you'll be able to do that. Thank you so much for coming and gracing our Mind Speak session this year. Really was most enjoyable.